Hi, this is Don McKenzie with Great Commission Church, and I would like to welcome you to our study of the New Covenant in Hebrews chapter 8. This is part 2. All right, we are picking up where we left off in part 1. To quickly review, in part 1, we saw in verse 6 that Jesus, as a priest under a new and better covenant, has obtained a more excellent ministry than that of any old covenant priest. Now, the main reason this better covenant is better is because it has different and better promises than the Mosaic law covenant. The author of Hebrews now wants to explain this better covenant and its better promises. But there is one important clarification he wants to make. And that brings us to verse 7. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then no place would have been sought for a second. All right, in verse 7, this better covenant is better than that first covenant. Now, the author is making a contrast between the first covenant, which we will see as the Mosaic covenant, and between the better covenant, which we will see as the new covenant prophesied in Jeremiah 31 and following. But the point in this verse is to highlight there would be no need for a second covenant and a better covenant unless there was something wrong with the first covenant. So the author starts with the phrase, for if that first covenant had been faultless, we would not need another one called the second at the end of the verse. How did this author know there was a second and better covenant? How did he know the first one had a flaw and was not faultless? Because this author knew what was prophesied in Jeremiah 31 through 34. But the author quickly wants to dismiss any thoughts that the first covenant was faulty because of a flaw in its designer, who was God. He wants to address why is it faulty? And then that brings us to verse 8, because finding fault with them, he says, so why was the first covenant faulty? Well, the first word of verse 8 is because. And then he tells us why the first covenant was faulty. The problem with this first covenant was not God. Instead, God found fault with them. So a covenant is between two parties. In this case, the first covenant was between God and the nation of Israel. God was faithful, whereas the people of Israel were not. All right, let's add the rest of verse 8. Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. So the author of Hebrews now starts quoting Jeremiah 31, which is why it's in quotes. Who is he and the phrase he says? Well, it is the Lord who is speaking through Jeremiah. Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord. All right, so the prophet Jeremiah, around 600 BC, wrote down exactly what he heard from the Lord. And the author of Hebrews uses it to prove that this better covenant was always God's plan to accomplish what the old covenant was never designed to do. All right, let's summarize Hebrews 8, 6 through 8a. Hebrews chapter 8, starting with verse 6, gives us an inspired commentary on Jeremiah 31. The new explains the old. And we learn three important things. Jesus has a much better ministry because he mediates this better covenant, which is based on better promises, better ministry, better covenant, better promises. The reason there was a need for a new covenant was because the first one was faulty. It was not God's fault, but the nation of Jewish people. So the Lord spoke through Jeremiah to announce he was going to one day make a new covenant with Israel. So the old prophesied the new, but what we're going to see is that the new explains the old. Now that brings us to this better covenant, and the author of Hebrews starts quoting Jeremiah in the second half of verse 8. All right, let's read the entire prophecy in Jeremiah 31 as recorded in Hebrews chapter 8. It says, "Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they did not continue in my covenant, and I disregarded them, says the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my laws in their mind and write them on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. None of them shall teach his neighbor and none his brother, saying, Know the Lord. For all shall know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their lawless deeds I will remember no more." All right, let's go back to verse 8b and start breaking this prophecy down. Now let's ask some questions and let the text give us the answers. Okay, what is the main topic here? All right, sure. It's all about a new covenant. When Jeremiah wrote this, was this new covenant past, present, or future? Well, it was future. So this is clearly a prophecy because he says the days are coming, so they're not here yet. And I will, not I did, I will make a new covenant. Who are the parties to this new covenant? Says the Lord, I will make. So the Lord is one party to this covenant. He's actually going to make the agreement. And the second parties are the house of Israel and the house of Judah. When Jeremiah wrote this, Israel was divided into two nations, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was referred to as Israel, and the southern kingdom was just one tribe, so it was called by that tribe name, Judah. So the parties of the new covenant are the Lord and all of Israel, even though they were divided at the time. Now for fun, how many times would you guess this phrase, new covenant, is used in the entire Bible, Old and New? 38 times, 32 times, 10 times, or 4? Well, the answer is 10 times. So is this even a major Bible doctrine if it's only mentioned 10 times? The simple answer is yes, absolutely. It is referenced a lot in the Bible, but only mentioned by this phrase, new covenant, 10 times. And we're going to see that this is the greatest and most important agreement in history. It is what history is all about. Well, thank you for watching part 2 of the New Covenant, and I hope you'll tune in to part 3. Thanks for watching.